Hey everybody, welcome back to the Vince Salerno podcast. This is episode 88. As always, I'm your host, Vince Salerno, and this week we really don't have too much to talk about. There's one trailer that I would like to discuss, but other than that, today we're going to talk about something a little evergreen. Batman. I'm not too outspoken as far as my love for DC superheroes in the past. I've mostly been very outspoken about my love for Marvel and the MCU and characters from that comic book world. But I do have a huge love for DC comics as well, specifically Superman and Batman in that order. But I know recently Batman's been on my mind. I've been watching The Penguin. I watched The Batman again for Halloween, and I've just been reflecting on my thoughts on just the Batman franchise as a whole, because I think I also have a very different view of Batman compared to most. And yeah, I thought that'd be a good thing to discuss, fun thing to discuss. So we'll get into that in just a second, but first let's talk about this trailer that just came out. This is the second trailer, official trailer for Star Wars Skeleton Crew. This is the latest streaming series from Lucasfilm and Disney in the Star Wars universe since, well, The Acolyte, but we forgot about that very quickly. This show centers on four kids who discover a spaceship, get lost in space, and have to find their way back home. Very simple storyline. They come across a pirate or a Jedi turned pirate, played by Jude Law, who agrees to help them get home while also evading some evil pirates and maybe finding some Star Wars-y galactic treasure. It's very much everyone's already making these comparisons, and I think the creators have made these comparisons. It's very Steven Spielberg, Amblin, Goonies inspired. The biggest influence is Goonies. Like that's kind of at face value what they're trying to emulate is the Goonies. And as a fan of that movie growing up, as a particular favorite of mine and my brother's, I think it's great. You know, I mean, some people are saying, and I did say this admittedly, that the suburban location that these kids are from is a little weird. It's odd for the Star Wars universe, because Star Wars typically doesn't, at least in my opinion, Star Wars has never really verbatim tried to translate our world into the world. It's done that, but in ways that make sense to this like fictional galaxy far, far away. Like Coruscant is like any big city, like New York City or Los Angeles or Dallas, stuff like that. But it doesn't feel like New York City or Dallas. I mean, it's all these different things. They have bars, they have streets, they have traffic, but it's done in a way where you're not necessarily thinking about the real world influence of those locations. And I think this is the first Star Wars piece of media to very not so subtly adapt a location that we are familiar with in our culture, that it almost hits too close to home. Like, I don't love that they have suburbs and streets and houses and mailboxes and schools that look too close to home. If they tried really hard to make this look a little more otherworldly, I think I wouldn't be having that issue. But it just feels, it in some ways doesn't really feel like it takes place in the Star Wars universe. What, of course, it actually does. But it's just weird. I'm scrubbing through the trailer right now, and like the opening is like shots of like cars driving through a tunnel. And there's one particular shot of like the suburb itself. The streets, and they have streets, they have sidewalks, they have light posts. It just feels like it feels too much like a actual suburb. I mean, I can tell that like in this particular screenshot, they've tried to make it look a little different. I mean, there are like the cars are still like speeders and they're on a track on the left of the street and the right of the street. The houses are sort of abnormally shaped. The yards are fenced off in an interesting way, but it just still feels too close to reality. And so I think it's going to take a while for me to get used to that. Because when you think about Tatooine, that was essentially supposed to be like a kid growing up in Iowa, and I know because I did grow up in Iowa. It's like farmland, like it's being stuck in the middle of nowhere, and you're wanting to get off. You wanting to get out and explore and try new things. Or not try new things, but you want to get out and you want to experience other parts of the world because there's nothing but farmland and corn as far as the eye can see. But they reinterpreted that location and the feeling of that location, and they put it on a desert planet where they're farming for moisture farmers. I think I don't really know the science of what they're doing there, but they're moisture farmers. They are farmers, but it's recontextualized in a way that makes sense for a galaxy far away, where you're not thinking about our home. And there are little things that like they do pull from reality, of course. Like they have kitchens, they have milk, they have all these things. Like those are the things that like anybody would have in any type of fictional world. You know, it's when it hits way too close to home, and if anything, it feels more like a cross between like a western, like Mos Eisley specifically feels like a western town, compared a western town recontextualized to be in a science fiction setting compared to this, where this feels just like they did a suburb, but they just tweaked some minor things. So I don't know, like maybe I'm being nitpicky. I don't want to be nitpicky. I do think the show looks good. Once they get out of the suburb and you start to see them going across the galaxy, they're like hanging on to the roof of a spaceship. Jude Law looks awesome. I love his costume. I love the vibe he gives off. I want to see more of him. I love the idea of doing pirates in the Star Wars universe. I think we've seen pirates before, but there's never been like a full like focus on them. And I think again, essentially doing Goonies in Star Wars is a fun concept. And I love the trailer. I love that they used Major Tom coming home, but they actually changed the lyrics as if it was sung by some alien creature in the Star Wars universe. It didn't just have that song, because I heard that. I was like, oh wait, now we're having real music from our reality in the Star Wars world. I don't know how I feel about that. But then not entirely, but the fact that they did choose to make it a alien singing the song and not the actual song, at least did a lot for me to make it feel like, okay, this is still Star Wars. Now, if they start doing that for the actual show itself, I don't know. My biggest fear for this show now is that it's going to hit too close to our reality, and it's going to not feel like Star Wars. Because when you watch something from the Star Wars universe, you want to escape. You don't want to feel like this is our reality. You want it to feel like it's adjacent to our reality, but not actually within our reality. Hence why it's a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Because 90% of everything that happens in Star Wars couldn't actually happen in our reality, obviously. But that, again, that's just my personal nitpick. Otherwise, I'm excited for this show. It's very different. I usually push against people saying like, oh, I want to see a show that's not about the Skywalkers or the main conflict, when that's like my bread and butter. Like, to me, that's Star Wars, and I want to watch things that do pertain to like Han, Luke, and Leia and those main characters. But if there's an interesting concept that is outside the universe and is taking place in other parts of the galaxy, I mean, if it's a good idea, then let's go. And this looks like a really fun idea. I think it's supposed to take place in that the Mandalorian timeline of the Star Wars universe, so right after Episode 6. So this could somehow connect to the Mandalorian and the Thrawn events, which, I mean, look, if we like Jude Law's character and those kids end up showing up again and in that conflict, I wouldn't mind that if it's a good show. You can't get any worse than what we've gotten over the past several years with Star Wars. And I'm not going to go into my spiel because I've already done that. I did that several episodes ago. If you want to check out that episode, I'll link it somewhere here in the description or in this episode, so you can watch me kind of giving a full analysis breakdown of where I'm at with Star Wars and breaking down that Hollywood Reporter article about why Disney is bad at Star Wars and they need to change things. But it looks good. It looks fine. It looks like it could be another beacon of hope for Star Wars. We'll see. I'll definitely give my thoughts on this. I do want to watch it. I didn't want to watch The Acolyte like at all, just because I knew I wouldn't like it. There seems to be some interesting visuals and all that, but sorry, like 1,000 Jedi charging a Sith is not, with multicolored lightsabers, is not enough to get me to watch a show. It's just not. I'm not that easily persuaded. But yeah, Skeleton Crew should be good. Hopefully, we'll see. God willing. Okay, now let's get into the main reason why I'm here today, to talk about something that I don't know if I've really gone in depth about before, and that's Batman. Now, as far as DC is concerned, I've always been a bigger fan of Superman as opposed to Batman. Superman's just more my cup of tea. You know, my favorite Marvel character, second to Spider-Man, has always been Captain America because of his morality, his values, his morals, and Superman very much is in the same vein of that character. They both have a lot in common. But I always was a Superman fan before I was a Captain America fan. It's just Captain America, obviously, for obvious reasons, took over the culture very quickly. And unfortunately, Superman has not been able to have his moment in the sun, so to speak. But despite that, I think Superman is one of the more beloved, celebrated, legendary characters. And I think what DC has on Marvel, at least as far as the movies are concerned, and at least specifically relegated to Batman and Superman, is that these characters are so old and ingrained with our culture as far as just being celebrated and the most recognizable superheroes, even more so than the Marvel characters, in my opinion, that I think that opens them up to more diverse interpretations in comics, in TV shows, in movies. I mean, like, look at the litany of animated Batman and Superman movies that mostly adapt comic book stories, now that I think about it, but still, there is a core tenet to those characters, but there is a diversity in how they're interpreted that I don't think Marvel has been able to achieve at this point, and I don't know if they ever will with the MCU model that they have going on, but that's neither here or there. But the reason why I wanted to discuss this, I watched The Batman with my wife right before Halloween, because in my opinion, it's a Halloween watch. And that piqued my interest in watching The Penguin. And also one of my friends at work who's a big Batman fan, he told me if I really liked The Batman, I should really consider checking out The Penguin. And, you know, I initially kind of brushed off the Penguin because I'm not really into spin-offs outside of the main characters. Depending on how interesting the character is, I just didn't think like, oh, okay, who cares about the Penguin? Like he was all right in the Batman, but what really is there to tell about that character? What more? How could he be any more interesting than he was in the show? Which to me wasn't that interesting. And then I watched literally the first 10 minutes of the Penguin. I was hooked. Like it tells you everything you want to know about you need to know about the Penguin, and kind of these things that you assume about the character in the Batman, but it kind of makes it concrete within those first 10 minutes and throughout the entire show. And it's not a show about, you know, good guys, even bad guys who are kind of good. It's about bad people. Like these are all bad people. But anyways, I'll get into my thoughts on more thoughts on the Penguin in a little bit. But I watched that movie and that show, and this past Halloween, this is coming out after Halloween. This past Halloween, I was at a party, and I was talking to my brother-in-law, and we started talking about we're talking about movies, we're talking about Christopher Nolan, and we got onto Batman, and I asked him, "Have you seen the Batman?" And he said, "Yeah, I liked it. I just didn't think it was it didn't beat out The Dark Knight for me. Like the Christopher Nolan films are the best Batman interpretation." And I told him, "Yeah, I love Christopher Nolan. I just don't know if I love the Christopher Nolan movies. I just don't know if like they're, in my opinion, the best Batman we've gotten. I don't even know if we've gotten the best Batman." And we kind of had a very civil like back and forth about Batman, and what we liked, what we didn't like about like the Batman versus the Dark Knight versus the stuff that's come before. And I kind of realized, like, I've always had this thought in my head about my thoughts on Batman, but I've never really actually put it out there or told people about this. But one, I don't know if we've ever truly gotten a definitive Batman as far as his comic book counterpart, and I'm still kind of waiting for that version to come out in the movies. And two, I don't see the Batman movies in maybe the way that like we see the MCU films, where we want to see Marvel do the most faithful version from the comic book counterpart as possible. The way I see Batman is, again, going back to what I said about the diversity of Batman and Superman throughout the years, I am less concerned. I want to see a definitive comic book version of Batman on screen, and I'm hoping that we get that with the Andy Muschietti DCU Brave and the Bold Batman. I think that's the direction they're going to take that character, hopefully, that version of the character. But I mean, based on the fact that he's been done in films for for years, for decades, I see Batman more as, at this point, as a character who you can, as long as the take is interesting, you can do virtually anything you want with Batman. Going back to the Adam West Batman, which was my introduction to Batman as a kid. I remember watching that movie like a lot as a kid. My brother and I really loved that movie, and we took it, seriously. Like there were times when it gets dramatic, despite how corny it is nowadays. But we took it for what it was, until we grew up, of course. So that was like my first Batman watch as a kid, and then I also knew about the '90s Batman animated series from Bruce Timm, Kevin Conroy, and Mark Hamill. And I knew about the Justice. I was a huge fan of the Justice League animated show. Maybe not like I wasn't. I had a few toys from that, and I'd watch it every now and then. But I was never like a sit down and watch every episode from chronological order. But like if it was on, I would watch it because I love superheroes. And I knew about the 90s Batman films, like, the 80s and 90s Batman films, I guess. So Batman from Tim Burton, Batman Returns, Batman Forever, Batman and Robin. And I think that was really, those were the Batman movies at the time. Like, if you were talking about Batman movies, those were it. The Dark Knight trilogy had not been a thing yet. I think obviously Batman and Robin put those future Batman films in limbo until, of course, Chris Nolan did do Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, and I always knew of Batman. I knew who he was, but I never really was invested in the character. I had a few Batman action figures growing up, actually, but they were based on the Bruce Timm animated series. It wasn't really until like The Dark Knight Rises that I really got invested in the Batman movies, mostly because I was just a big fan of Christopher Nolan as a filmmaker. And I remember the hype around The Dark Knight Rises and the casting, and watching the exclusive teaser trailer attached to Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. And I don't necessarily like to classify it like this, because I might borderline as sacrilegious, but like as a kid, that was kind of like a religious experience, watching a trailer that like was not online and it was just in theaters, and you exclusively got to see that. Like that was really cool to experience. I also got to see I think it was attached to Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, like the first 10 minutes of The Dark Knight Rises in IMAX. And again, like that was exclusive. It was really cool. It was like, that was a really cool time to be around, seeing the anticipation for this Batman movie. And it was the first time I was really invested in anything Batman related. And I believe it's the first Batman movie I ever saw in the theater was The Dark Knight Rises. And then after that ended, and they talked about like Henry Cavill's Man of Steel, turning that into a cinematic universe based on, from that character, that Superman, and then having a Batman in that universe, and is it going to be Christopher Nolan's Batman? Is it going to be a new Batman? Then it ended up being, so far, my favorite Batman, Ben Affleck. That was the Batman I was most invested in. One, because I was such a huge fan of Man of Steel, and two, because he looked to be the most faithful Batman as far as the comics go. I knew about and had seen the animated adaptations of The Dark Knight Returns, and knew that storyline very well. And it's still one of my favorite, if not my favorite, Batman story in the comics today is The Dark Knight Returns. And the fact that Zack Snyder was going to base his version off of that really excited me. And I love the costume, because we'd never seen Batman in like the traditional gray, gold utility belt, black emblem on his chest. Like I had, again, like my main concern as far as comic book characters on screen, superheroes on screen, is seeing the most faithful version on screen. And as of today, that was, in my opinion, the most faithful version. Especially the fact that he was based on a comic book that was so beloved. And, so much so, I'm such a fan of him that I even have the DC Multiverse Batman action figure for my collection, because, come on, this thing's awesome. Yeah, I love what they did with Ben Affleck and Batman v Superman, despite how that movie turned out. I hope to do a kind of an analysis on the DCU, at least those Zack Snyder films, and how all that went down, because it's fascinating. It's very fascinating, and I feel horrible that Ben Affleck didn't really get a chance to be in his own Batman movie, which of course is how we got to The Batman with Matt Reeves and Robert Pattinson, which, honestly, the more I think about it, the more I want to say is my favorite Batman movie. The main reasons, because like when that first trailer from the DC fan event, I don't remember what it's called, but that fan event that happened where we got that first trailer, we didn't really know much about the film. We saw the costume, we had seen set photos of the Batmobile. I think that was pretty much it. We knew what Batman looked like, we knew what the Batmobile looked like, but we didn't see anything else. And that trailer was like the first time we were seeing the world of the Batman. We didn't know if it was going to be veering towards a more comic booky approach, or if it was going to be sort of more grounded like Christopher Nolan's. And in a lot of ways, I think it's even more grounded than even Christopher Nolan's take. When that trailer plays and you hear the Nirvana song, Something in the Way, it just immediately like sets the tone and the vibe of that world. And for me, it invoked the 90s. It felt like a 90s Batman movie. Like a David Fincher 7 Batman movie. Like, it really felt like, I was saying for a long time, like, this feels like David Fincher directed this, not Matt Reeves. But I loved the stylistic approach to the Batman. It was just so I struggled to find the word that describes it for me, but I guess the only word that can come to mind is nostalgic, because Nirvana is obviously ingrained into the 90s culture. And even though it definitely obviously takes place in like modern times, so to speak, because like in the Penguin, you find out that they have TikTok. So it's definitely not a 90s Batman movie. But obviously with the Tim Burton Batman films taking place in the 90s too, like I was getting like subtle vibes from the both of those. Like they just both felt in some ways intertwined, but not at the same time. I also just love like how gritty and dark and realistic this Batman is. Like it feels like this is not Bruce Wayne with like the most, like the best tactical gear that money can buy, like in Christopher Nolan's version. Like Christopher Nolan, I think the reason why his Batman works so well is because they really do play up the billionaire side of Bruce Wayne, the fact that he uses his money to buy the best gear money can buy to become Batman. But for Robert Pattinson, even though he is Bruce Wayne the billionaire, he still has gear that just looks kind of homemade, makeshift, run down. It looks like it's tactical, and obviously that it could, get him through the night, but it has this homemade feel to it. Like he didn't go buying the best tech money can buy. He bought the most practical tech money can buy, I guess. And it's interesting. It just is a very different approach. A more dirty approach, I guess. Maybe that's a good, like, 'cause you get this idea that like this Batman is kind of he comes from a much more run down, dirty, grummy version of Gotham, and everything kind of invokes that. Even the mask, I love his mask because it feels like a cross between like the Christopher Nolan mask and the Adam West Batman mask, in that it feels like it could get him through the night, but it's homemade. It has this very abnormal shape to him, where he doesn't even necessarily look heroic or even like cool wearing it, but it gets the job done. Like the nose piece specifically looks weird. It looks weird, but it's still everything still works. So I think the more I think about it, the more I really like that interpretation of the Batman, and that's where we are currently today, with that being the main Batman of the culture. And then of course we're waiting for Andy Muschietti's second take on Batman, because he got a chance to obviously do Batman twice in The Flash. Of course, he was doing the Ben Affleck Batman, and he was doing the Tim Burton, Michael Keaton Batman, both of which, not I don't want to say by his fault per se, but just not great takes on those already established versions of those characters. It was nice to see Ben Affleck as Batman for one last time, but it really did not do the character any more or less justice. It just was kind of this really odd portrayal of both those versions. And I guess I shouldn't even say that about the not the Michael Keaton version. I think what they did was interesting of him. It just was he was good. It just wasn't anything like earth shattering as you would hope for Michael Keaton, the man who continues to proclaim himself as Batman, would be. You would think it would be a lot more, but I think I'm more looking forward to seeing what Andy Muschietti does with a clean slate for Batman than whatever that was, which felt like more studio interference than anything. But again, I hope that version of the Batman is the most like comic accurate, with like go zany, go crazy, go fun, invoke the 90s a little bit with like the crazy kooky villains and the weird costumes, Batman in his gray suit, gold utility belt, like do the 90s TV show. That's what I want to see. I think that's the most faithful adaptation of the Batman we've gotten. In fact, I feel horrible forgetting this, but I think beyond the Batman, as far as like just anything that has come close to portraying the comic book version of Batman as faithfully as possible, is The Mask of the Phantasm, which is the movie version of the 90s Batman. This was like a theatrically released Batman movie from the 90s cartoon with Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill reprising their roles as Batman and the Joker. That like hits to the heart of who Bruce Wayne and who Batman is. It pushes him beyond his limits. The Joker's in there, so it's almost like an essential element to have the Joker involved in some capacity in every Batman movie, as annoying as that is. But it's a perfect movie, and it's in my opinion the best Batman movie in animation or in live action. As far as what I favor in live action, I think it's definitely the Batman right now. As again, I love the Christopher Nolan films. I think they're great. But just tonally, like the Batman is much more interesting to me. And this, I'm going through all the films and the culture and like how how Batman has evolved throughout the years, because my point being, the way I see Batman, it differs from how a lot of people see Batman, I think. And I'd love to know if other people agree with me on this or not, but the way I see Batman is the way I think a lot of people see a character like Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes has been around since, I mean, God knows how long. I mean, he's been around since forever. Like, those books have been part of our culture for generations. And he's the character, along with Watson, have been repurposed and interpreted differently all throughout the years, while still maintaining the core of the character. I mean, there have been plenty of movie adaptations. I'm sure even like I'm making a big assumption because I haven't seen them, but I'm sure there are like black and white Sherlock Holmes movies. I know there was like a young Sherlock Holmes movie in the 80s. The Great Mouse Detective from Disney, which is basically a Sherlock Holmes film with mice. There are, I mean, plenty of Sherlock Holmes movies, direct-to-DVD, TV movies, theatrical films. Obviously, the most famous adaptation, one of the most famous adaptations being Robert Downey Jr. and Jude Law in the Sherlock Holmes Guy Ritchie films. And also, one of my favorite shows is the Benedict Cumberbatch, Martin Freeman Sherlock, which was one of the first modern adaptations of Sherlock Holmes, second to, I believe, Elementary, which was like a CBS version, like an American CBS version with I think it was the first time a Asian woman played John Watson. I think her name was Joan Watson. And, you know, at that point, like I think when that first came out, I was ready to proclaim wokeness or just like, this is weird. Why are you doing this? But my opinions kind of changed on that over the years because Sherlock Holmes has been done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times over multiple forms of media. And some are more faithful, some are maybe not as faithful. Maybe the one that I prefer being the Robert Downey Jr. version. And so if you want to change and tweak little things here and there, reinterpret things over different forms of media, like making John Watson a woman, I'm okay with that, honestly, because, again, there have been multiple versions done of Sherlock Holmes to where, like, you can't just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. You have to start changing things up a bit. And as long as you're creating a new world, a new world where Sherlock Holmes and John Watson inhabit, having different, I mean, even gender swapping Sherlock Holmes is not necessarily a horrible idea, in my opinion. I mean, they've done it with John Watson. And that show had like 4 or 5 successful seasons, I believe, maybe 3. On top of that, you also have Enola Holmes with, Millie Bobby Brown from Stranger Things and Henry Cavill playing Sherlock Holmes. So there's just multiple avenues, multiple ways in which Sherlock Holmes has been done over the years, and most of them have been met with like positive reception from fans. In the same way that Sherlock Holmes has been reinterpreted and tweaked throughout the years in different adaptations, that's the way I see Batman. Like, for me, my definitive Batman as of now is the DCEU version of Batman. So I'm happy. Like, I got my Batman. I like that Batman. And if they do other things, new, interesting, unique things, I'm cool with that. Even like technically like race swapping Jim Gordon and Catwoman in the Batman seemed like a controversial thing at the time, but I didn't really actually see anybody really raising any concerns. One, because those two are phenomenal actors, but also, again, I think this adds to my theory and my belief that because Batman's been done time and time again, a lot of people, their definitive version of Batman is the Dark Knight trilogy. And that's pretty faithful to the comic book interpretation of those characters. So if you want to cast a black guy as Jim Gordon or a black woman as Catwoman, as long as they're good actors and they do a good job, who's to say they shouldn't? And Jeffrey Wright as Jim Gordon was phenomenal. I mean, it was better than I thought it was going to be, because, I mean, let's be honest, Gary Oldman as Jim Gordon is in my opinion hard to top, but they did it. He was great. He was really good. Same with Zoe Kravitz. I think I still prefer Anne Hathaway's Catwoman, but I thought that Zoe Kravitz did a great job. It was a very different, unique take on the character. It made her more ingrained in the main conflict of the Batman. Now, I do realize that the Caped Crusader, Bruce Timm, James Gunn, or not James Gunn, J.J. Abrams' Batman show came out, and that was met with a lot of mixed to negative reception, as far as I'm aware, because they gender swapped the Penguin, and I know most fans didn't like that. I haven't seen it, so I don't know what the portrayal looks like, and I just frankly don't care, because I don't have an interest in that particular show. It just doesn't interest me as a Batman fan. But again, like these characters, they are timeless at this point. They've been reinterpreted time and time again, and so to do different, unique things with them is how they're going to continue to survive. And because the Batman is a perfect example, that take was so unique to Matt Reeves and different from Christopher Nolan and Tim Burton and Zack Snyder, anything that's come before Batman. It's so unique, and that's what attracts me. It's also an October detective story, and it's one of the first times we've seen Batman in proper detective form, because that's what I've wanted to see. I'm a huge fan of detective stories, and seeing a murder mystery in the vein of a Gone Girl or a Seven, David Fincher style detective film, but in the world of the Batman, or of Batman in general, was really cool to see, and just like appealed to my taste as a fan of detective stories in particular. Again, I know a lot of people will say like, oh, but Christopher Nolan's the best Batman. He has the best Batman movies. And I don't necessarily disagree objectively. Subjectively, I think I'm more of a the Batman guy, just because that it piques my unique interests more than Christopher Nolan, which was more of this, it had this more like tactical epic feel to it, even though it was influenced by other crime movies, and in its own right was a great as far as like a modern crime film. But again, like the Batman is in like its own little time capsule, in that it invokes the 90s, even though it's in a modern day version of Gotham. I mean, I like both. They both have a lot to offer. I think that's the ultimate point I'm trying to make, is that I think there is something to love about every adaptation of Batman that we've gotten. I mean, I know people don't like the more corny Batman films, being Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, but even those films, like, they have something to offer. And I feel like Joel Schumacher, God rest his soul, was trying to go for more of an adaptation of the Adam West Batman movies, or movie or TV show, but like done in like the same vein and the same world as Tim Burton's version that he established, while also kind of like having that silliness and fun of the Adam West version, which, depending on your mileage, it might be your cup of tea, might not. I don't think, and both of them I think are fun movies to watch in hindsight. I think we can kind of enjoy them for what they are now. But I think even the Batman Forever, I haven't seen it in years, but I think Batman Forever even has some like deeper elements that can be reappreciated, I guess, in our modern sense. And there's talk of like a Schumer cut or a director's cut that has yet to be released. And if there's hope for Zack Snyder, there's hope for Joel Schumacher. So who knows if that'll happen? But you have all these unique versions of Batman over the years, and I think all of them, not one of them has. There are obviously some like bad spots we probably don't want to talk about that are a little embarrassing for the character, of course. But I think every adaptation of Batman has something unique to say about the character that I find interesting, that I find compelling, that I find worth watching and talking about and discussing. And so I don't really, I guess, to marry like my thoughts on Batman with Sherlock Holmes, like both of these characters have been done so many times that the only way they'll survive is if more unique, diverse adaptations of the characters and perspectives on the characters are done. And maybe sometimes that involves race swapping them, as long as it's not to push some perverted agenda. If it's like, no, like we actually want to explore like a female version of the Penguin, or a female version of John Watson, and then like that relationship with Sherlock Holmes, or that relationship with the Batman, or whatever, at this point, like, as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, like that's how those characters are going to survive the culture, if they are allowed to be played with and evolve. And there have been so many adaptations of both characters that you can pick your personal definitive version, even though there hasn't been a definitive version yet. And I think that's going to be an uphill battle for Marvel, to get to this point with Batman and Superman with Iron Man and Captain America and those other characters, because the universe they've created has created one version of Steve Rogers, one version of Tony Stark, one version of Thor. And so if there's going to be future interpretations of those characters, you're going to have to recast and reboot that universe, which is hopefully what's coming after Secret Wars. My hope is that we're going to get a new Tony Stark and new Steve Rogers to inhabit the world of the MCU, and that we can hopefully get some new, fresh directors to have new and unique takes on Iron Man and Captain America, even though you have Robert Downey Jr. And Jon Favreau's Iron Man, which I feel like that's like the 89 Batman of superhero films, and that it created like this unique, definitive take on Batman and the DC comic book world as a whole. And Iron Man did that with under Jon Favreau's leadership, creative direction. And I think we need fresh new takes on those characters, because what they've been doing with what they're going to do with Ironheart and what they've been doing with Falcon America, I don't think it's working. All due respect to those actors, the fans have rejected that. And, I guess it remains to be seen if Captain America, Falcon America is going to work in a solo film, but that movie apparently has been rife with disastrous reshoots and re-edits and rewrites. It sounds like it's a mess, even though there are some fun things to look forward to in that film. But anyways, to wrap this up, for me, there is no definitive Batman as of yet, and I've really enjoyed every unique take on the Batman character, specifically the Zack Snyder, Ben Affleck take on the character. And it's a shame that didn't go exactly how it should have. I would have loved to have seen a Ben Affleck solo Batman film. There are still people who think that's still going to happen, but I think Zack Snyder has moved on. I think everybody else has moved on. There's rumors Henry Cavill's coming to the MCU as Cyclops, so everyone's moved on from that. I mean, I'm very excited for David Cornsweet as Superman, James Gunn's DCU. I really want to see what they do with Batman, because again, if they make a comic book accurate Batman, that could take the cake for my personal favorite Batman, because that's always what's important to me as a fan of these characters. And again, as far as Batman movies that we have, I think I'm more of the Batman guy than a Dark Knight guy. But there's room for all of them. I think they're all great. They all have something unique and fun and interesting to say about the characters. Yes, the characters being Batman, and I think they all have something fun and unique and interesting to say about Batman and his rogues gallery and his allies. And as long as there's no woke agendas at large, I say, let's get crazy. Let's change things up with these characters as time goes on. Let's see unique, different adaptations and takes on these characters, and see where the cards fall, see where the culture enjoys or doesn't enjoy them. I think the only thing that sticks out that I didn't enjoy about the DCEU Batman was his Joker. Not a fan of his Joker, even in the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League. Alright guys, so that wraps up the episode. I initially had, at the end of this, a little spiel about the election and the importance of voting. I shot this episode right before the election. Obviously, we are well past the election. Donald Trump is our president again. Praise God for that. So here I am recording a new ending for the episode. So thank you guys for watching and listening. Hope you guys enjoyed the episode. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe to this channel. You can check out my short films, trailer reactions, other episodes of the Vince Salerno podcast. Have a great day. We'll see you next time. God bless, and peace out.